guys, it's me Alice, and I wanted to make a video essentially sharing my tips and what I've learned from preparing for my flight to Korea, because it could get quite complicated. There's a lot of rules that change all the time, so make sure to check with the official websites of the Korean embassy to make sure you're listening to all the rules prior to traveling to Korea. So with that said, I want to share my experience with preparing for Korea, as well as flying there and what happens when you land at Incheon Airport. Some helpful context. I traveled with my husband and my little sister, and we all happen to be US citizens who have Korean national grandparents, basically relatives who live in Korea and are registered under the Korean government. We are all visiting for about 30 days, so we don't need a visa. Now, if you're traveling for more than 90 days, you'll probably have to get a visa to be in Korea. And we are all vaccinated and tested negative on our PCR test prior to departure. There are some things that you need to prepare to fly to Korea, at least for Korean Air and going to Korea. So one, you need a negative PCR test, not an antigen test, but a PCR test. And you need to have these 5 things written on that PCR test. So one, you need your name on there, and it has to be the same as your passport. 2, it has to have your passport number and or your birth date. And 3, it needs to have the date of collection, which means when you got your PCR test done, right? So when they stick the little nasal thing up your nose, that's when the date is talking about. And 4, the date of the results. When did the results come out? And 5, a seal or a signature or like the name of the doctor or nurse or whatever health professional that read your results on that document. Now, the reason why they want that, I think it just seems more official. Korean officials really care about documents that look official. So they might not take, I know like CVS tests are really common here in the US, but I don't think they'll accept that there because it doesn't look as like official. Me, my husband, and my sister all got our tests done at Same Day Health, and it's covered by insurance. So, and they have a great turnaround time. So check that out. And you need to get it printed and brought to the airport. One tip that I have is that prior to going to the airport, highlight the 5 things that I've mentioned, as well as circling your PCR test results, so that when you hand it to the airport folks or the people in Korea, they can easily spot out the 5 things that they're looking for. So the second thing that you need is, if you are going to a friend's place or family or a government-approved Airbnb, you will need to get a 가족 증명서, which translates to a family relations document. Now, the reason why you need this is because Korea has this law where if you have a grandparent or a parent that is a Korean national, then you become a honorary Korean national and get some of the perks, same perks that Korean nationals have, which is quarantining at a personal residence. It has to be a grandparent or a parent. It can't be someone who's like an aunt, uncle, cousin, sister, brother. It has to be a parent or a grandparent. Not sure why, but that's the rules. I've seen and heard people get turned away at the airport because they use like an aunt as their like family proof. My mom was able to get the documents from my grandpa in Korea and then fax it over, but my husband was able to get it through the Korean embassy located here in the US. And I think you pay a couple of fees, but definitely worth getting because my husband was almost put into a facility without that 가족 증명서, even though we were married. Me and my sister and husband also provided additional documents just to do our due diligence. Like, for example, we brought a copy of me and my sister's birth certificate to prove like, hey, we are indeed sisters, and a marriage certificate for me and my husband to show that we are married, so that we would be able to quarantine together. Now, none of these like documents outside of the 가족 증명서 guarantees that you'll be able to quarantine at a family's place or a friend's place or government approved Airbnb. The 가족 증명서 is the only thing that will pretty much like help you get into one of those exemptions. Otherwise, you will probably have to go to the government provided facility, and those usually cost like over $2,000, and the prices like fluctuate, and you can't choose which hotel you go to, so you will have to pay out of pocket for that stay. They provide all the food and whatnot, and in my different video I'll mention some quarantine tips, but that might be better if you don't have like a jumnokdambono, which is like a registration number in Korea, or relatives in Korea who can order stuff for you, because it's really hard to order things in Korea without like a official Korean phone number and like government ID recognized by Korea. As for the flight itself, it was really seamless and safe. Everyone kept their mask on, there was no issues with that, and everyone's required to keep their mask on other than meal times. Also on the seating chart, they block off the middle seats for every like group of seatings. For example, you know how on the like near the window there's like window seat, middle seat, and like an aisle seat, so all the middle seats are blocked off so that you at least have like one seat away from someone. And my flight was fairly empty, so the guy that checked us in asked the three of us, hey, if you guys want, then I can have you guys sitting on all separate rows all by yourself, but we wanted to be like near each other, so we're like, it's okay, like we don't mind. But I think that seems to be the norm for a lot of these like Korean air flights at least, so I felt pretty safe. And there was a lot of good snacks and like food. I liked the bibimbap, and because it comes with a little seaweed soup, and there was a lot of other options that were also very good, and they provided like little snacks. And during these times, again, you could like take off your mask and eat, but make sure to put it back on once you're done. I personally chose to bring wet ones and like Clorox wipes to do like a wipe down of my like tray and my seating area, and like hand sanitizer to use before meals. They do provide little like wet towels that are individually wrapped, so you know, if you don't want to bring it, it's okay, but I personally did that. And yeah, overall it was a really good flight. It was 13.5 hours, but it went by pretty quickly. So once you've landed in Korea, there is a long process, understandably, just to make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row and got all the documents that you needed and you're really PCR negative, yada, yada, yada. So you'll stand in a long line headed towards the first station, where essentially they check your temperature, they'll check your PCR test, so make sure to have that paper where it has the 5 things that I've mentioned before and show that you're negative. Then they'll give you something like this, which is a sheet that declares that you've been screened and you're good to go, basically. And you'll also hand like 2 sheets that acknowledges, hey, I'm symptomless, I'm good, I acknowledge the risk of COVID-19, and yada, yada, yada. I'll put more details like here. And the next station is they'll make sure that you've downloaded the 2 apps that are necessary to gain entry into the country. Now, if you don't, then you'll be kicked out, but download these, and these are the apps that allow the Korean government to track where you are to make sure that you're staying in the designated quarantine area that you've chosen, whether it's the facility or the Airbnb, friend's place, or family's place. They're really helpful, but just to make it even more easy, make it easier for them, I recommend like doing like a paper sheet like this. Like I printed out like the address that I was staying at, my grandparents' phone numbers, as well as my grandparents' addresses, just to make it easier for them. And once you're done with this station, you'll be brought to an area where they will essentially test out your guardian's phone number and call to make sure, like, hey, do you know this person? Like, what's their name? Where are they coming from? And they didn't ask for me or my husband or my sister, but they may ask like, where are they staying? And do you know where that is? But if you have a Korean number, you can just give that and they'll call you to verify. And this number essentially is to be used so that like 2-3 days into your quarantine, someone will call you or call that number and ask like, hey, are you quarantined? Like everything's good? Like, do you need anything? And just to check up on you and kind of give you like the details on what to do prior to getting out of quarantine. So once you're done with that, you'll go on to the next station, and there you kind of hand over the documents like the family relations paper, as well as any other documents that you might have, and passport, and the address that you'll be staying at. Then they'll give you like this paper and this paper. Essentially, it's telling you that you are entering on this day, and this is the address that you'll be staying at for the quarantine. And if you don't stay in the quarantine, you will be fined a lot of money, essentially, and may go to jail. There's another document that says like these are the things that you're allowed to do during quarantine. These are the things that you're not allowed to do, where you're from, how long you'll be staying, yada yada yada. So these are all just to make sure that you acknowledge, like, you know, you're being quarantined. This is the address you're being quarantined at, and you're agreeing to that. Now, once you're done with that, you'll go to your last and final station, where you give your passport, all the documents that you've brought, as well as the new papers that they've given you. And that's where you kind of finally say, like, this is where I'm staying at, yada, yada, yada. And this is where they'll give you the final approval whether or not you can stay at this quarantine location, essentially. Another piece of paper that was like very important, I dropped it here, but was this. This is essentially entry confirmation that, yeah, they're allowed to come in, and they're allowed to stay at this facility, and you need to keep this while you're in Korea. So that's all official. Now, once you get past this phase, you can go to the baggage claim, pick up your baggages, and when you step out of the arrival gate, not arrival gate, but like, I guess like into the terminal where people can like pick you up, you could either choose to, one, get a taxi, which we chose to do, and it kind of ranges from like $70 to like $100 and something, depending on how big and what type of taxi, yada yada yada. You could also choose to ride the airport bus. Of course, you'll be stuck with like other passengers from like different areas. So if you're kind of worried about like testing positive for COVID later on, I recommend taking the taxi. And lately, I do think you can have your family pick you up, but you will be potentially putting your family members at risk. So I wouldn't recommend that either. But so the best, if you have the money and the funds to do so, I would recommend the taxi. Now, SIM card. You could get your SIM card once you come out of those gates or arrival doors. Either you could sign up earlier, it's like cheaper to do that, or you can get there and like get one from one of the 3 major I guess telephone lines. So like how America has like Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint, and T-Mobile and stuff, Korea has like KT, LG, and SKT. And from what I've heard, I could be mistaken, I think KT and SKT have the best coverage. So I got a KT SIM card for about 30 days, and that was about 74,000 won or something like that. And it's pretty easy to like get. Just go to one of the stations once you come out and ask for a SIM card. And there's like 2 options. One is like a data only card, so you can have unlimited data, but you can't like call or like text or receive text. But there's like another version where you're able to add on the option to be able to call text and have unlimited data, and that's the one that I chose because I knew that I would be like talking to my relatives and setting up reservations and appointments and things like that, and just for emergencies. Like, I knew that I would need it. Oh, another thing is that you cannot get a SIM card prior to getting all the checks and stuff. So you will need a Korean phone number for that process when you're like giving all the documents, because you will not be able to get a SIM card prior to getting to that step. So make sure that you know someone in Korea to give that number so that they can call that number. Otherwise, I don't know if they'll let you in. Maybe they will, but that I don't know. I haven't like tested that or heard that. Just make sure you have a friend or someone that they can call to verify. Even like your Airbnb host, I think that's okay too. Just make sure to get a Korean number where they can call to verify that they know you're coming and they know someone, that you know someone in Korea. I know that was a lot of information. Hopefully I covered everything, and if there's like more questions that you guys have, make sure to comment down below and I'll try to answer them the best I can. Of course, these laws are always changing, and Korea's just, you know, they're trying to figure out what to do and do it as safely as they can for their own citizens. So make sure to check, you know, their official government websites to get like the rundown on the most current version of these like regulations. But as of May 2021, what year is it? 2021, these are the things that I know, and hopefully it was helpful. And if it was helpful, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and make sure to comment down below with anything that you found helpful or any questions that you might have. And with that, I'm gonna sign off. See ya!